We struggled with a rather large CRM, hundreds of thousands of contacts or records that weren't necessarily fresh. And one of the big challenges for a startup or small team is just bandwidth. That's how we stumbled on Sculpted and Jacob. You feel like your asks are being heard. You share the mentality that the CRM doesn't need to be more than its usability for the team. You're super adaptable, and it's quite admirable what you're able to do with Clay. The ability to do it at all is impressive. And then the fact that we got something like a 95% match rate is quite good. At the end of the day, I don't think there's a better way to get clean CRM data. My name is Pierre Germain. I've been at Keen for almost 4 years. I'm the Senior Sales Enablement Manager there. And what we do is we provide marketing teams with a unified software platform to measure all of their marketing spend and attribute that to direct revenue performance. As any B2B SaaS enterprise, we struggled with a rather large CRM that had been pulled together from different instances, different data providers, different record keeping strategies at different times. And so it had gotten to be quite a bit of a mess and a tangle. And what we needed was actionable data on contacts that were new to the pipeline that we could influence quickly and that we could pass on to the reps for immediate action, as opposed to having to crawl through hundreds of thousands of contacts or records that weren't necessarily fresh. In the past, the problem was that we had no systemic solution other than having the team use the CRM, right? And depending on how much your team is in the CRM, continually updating it, and how frequently you change the standard operating procedures on them, you end up with a different quality of CRM, right? We hadn't really tried any systemic or tool solutions other than telling people how to use, ZoomInfo or Apollo or other parts of HubSpot to try and build their lists more accurately. When we looked at Clay, what stuck out was the ability to use massive files and upload everything at once, regardless of the format type, as long as you had a few key properties, and then the ability to then kind of homogenize the data and enrich it. I don't think there is a single tool that allows you to do that as fluidly as Clay does. And then number two, also from a live monitoring perspective, because part of the project was obviously getting a clean slate and having the historical record, accurate, but also moving on to the contacts that were coming into the pipeline, whether that's, attribution on LinkedIn ads or the website or HubSpot forms, etc. The ability to enrich in real time and then pushing that through to the CRM with specific queries for putting into industry buckets that we defined ourselves. So that's super helpful. And one of the big challenges for a startup or small team is just bandwidth, and the ability to learn new tools quickly is just sometimes limited, right? You see the vision and where you want to go, but you just don't have the time to walk the path necessarily. At the time, we were looking for kind of a whole CRM solution agency that could help with some reporting, integration with ad platforms, etc. But from my perspective, I always wanted to get the sales engine as clean as possible and as actionable as possible for our sales team. And I saw that as the top priority. Everything else was tangentially beneficial because after, a couple months of doing some Clay work myself, I just didn't have the time to build the engine as I wanted it to be built. So we started looking into Clay agencies, training solutions, etc. And that's how we stumbled on Sculpted and Jacob. And the rest is history. You've done great work. So when we started to look for a catch-all agency, actually, what we found is that we didn't really find anyone that was good at everything at once. As I said before, the priority is getting the sales engine humming. So that's when we focused on Clay agencies specifically and how to incorporate Clay completely with our sales motion. And then we found you. At that time, I think we were also looking at who said they had some experience with Clay, and then another couple, I don't remember exactly their names, but essentially at the end of the day, they weren't specialized in only Clay, and one of the differentiators was for you was that it was Clay specific. Because we sell to large organizations with multiple brands or teams involved in a decision, and often those teams and brands have different, let's say, company names or even email domains. One of the big challenges is how do we recognize that all of these people work at the same place, or at least would be involved potentially in a similar contract negotiation, that they're good targets? And then how do we bucket that into an industry categorization that makes sense from the perspective of our internal sales strategy, right? We don't necessarily care about the way Apollo or ZoomInfo or whatever other data provider buckets companies. What we want is for them to match our identified market and the way we talk about it, so that when our sales team goes to pull contacts from a certain industry, it speaks to the way we've categorized it, the talk tracks we've built for that certain industry, and therefore they're going to have better luck mining those contacts as opposed to relying on, the general healthcare industry categorization that you would get from ZoomInfo, which isn't necessarily accurate. If you put that into AI and you say, build me a list of companies that match this prompt, it'll do it. And so you can do this across the breadth of your whole ICP and have industry categorization that makes sense based off of AI prompts put into the Clay table. Your main advantage is that you're a small team, at least for now, right? And we got access to the same person, Jacob, through the entire sales process to the end of the scope, right? So it was one face for the most part the entire time. And that really helps with communication and making sure that you feel like your asks are being heard and that the conversation is not missing context, right? So that was number one. Now, obviously, that's not necessarily scalable, and I hope that you scale out of it. I hope you keep growing. Additionally, like from an actual workflow perspective, what you did well is you kept us focused and you share the mentality that a CRM doesn't need to be more than its usability for the team. And by that, I mean, sometimes, teams over time just keep adding more and more properties and ask for more and more context on the data that is being put into the CRM. And sometimes that's good, but rapidly it balloons into too much data that is not actionable. So at the beginning of the engagement, what we did is we set up a data model template that said, these are the key properties we care about at the company level. Here's how they interact with each other, where we want to source that data from, if we need to build custom AI logic to define certain things. And then from there, we had a skeleton of what we wanted the CRM to look like and the enrichments for it. Additionally to that, as we fed you different files and we came up to a certain blockers, you were super adaptable and flexible with the asks and the way we restructured the data to get to the endpoint that we had in the vision of the data model template, but not necessarily the way we had imagined getting there because of some limitations in unique identifiers, for example, or certain verifications for email types. But for the most part, we always found a solution quickly to whatever hurdle, and you were very concise and clear in your communications with your Loom videos and your recaps on a weekly basis. As parts of the project got done, everything was vetted and you asked for my feedback. So I feel quite happy as the final product has come to be. From an accuracy perspective, it's quite admirable what you're able to do with Clay, because I've been keen with 4 years, the entire time we've been at HubSpot, right? But we've used half a dozen different data providers over time. And so none of the data was normalized. Over 4 years, there was a lot of churn, job changes, etc. So the ability to feed all of that data to you, get a cleaned up historical record that tells us like this is how many contacts are still viable, etc., is quite good. And then to update the bad ones. First, the ability to do it at all is impressive. And then the fact that we got something like a 95% match rate is quite good. Obviously, we had a lot of deprecated contacts, which I need to clean up still or have started cleaning up. But the takeaway is if you're willing to put the time in and are clear about your asks, you can get very specific definitions from AI that match whatever categorization structure you want to apply to companies and contacts. You can get really good data depending on the waterfall of data providers that you use in Clay. So you're really only limited kind of by the effort and the money you're willing to put into each contact. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's a better way to get clean CRM data. Just in general, I've been very happy with the scope of work so far, and I'm excited for the ability to work on V2 now that we've got an actionable CRM and can keep in mind some like active monitoring of certain lists and ICP members, potential automation triggers, etc. So I see a clean CRM as only the starting point, right? After that, the goal is to have sales activate on good data and bring in revenue.